beautiful person. I am so excited to be here with you. I am live on Instagram and on TikTok and through StreamYard on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. So I am super excited to be talking with you tonight. And I'm really excited about the topic that we have tonight because it's one that's near and dear to my heart. And it's about healing. Hey, Leslie, hello. Nice to see you on Instagram. So, let me see. So first of all, I should introduce myself. My name is Hadass. I'm a life coach. I'm a well-being advocate. I am someone who likes to help people to age with vigor and dignity because I believe that every human is created in the image of the divine and we all deserve a good life. Everybody. We don't have to do anything in order to earn that. We just deserve it because we're humans. So that's that is the basis of my philosophy is that we are all humans and we all deserve a good life. And so I've been doing these videos on Sunday evenings, Sunday Silver with Hadass. Silver refers to the fact that I went through a whole thing letting my hair go silver. And that was quite the big deal for me because I've been coloring my hair since I was 34 years old. So that was a long time ago. So I am excited to be here with you talking about this Sunday Silver. So these are weekly talks that I do. They're usually about 20 minutes long, and each one of them has a topic about something that I feel is important to discuss, and I'm always excited to have people talk to me. Sometimes I squirrel when that happens. I kind of lose the plot a little bit because I have a whole bunch of different I have a few devices going here, so sometimes that's not always easy to keep track of, but I hope you will forgive me if that does happen. So now we are going to I wanted to show you this book that I want to talk about tonight. So it's a brand new book, came out in September. It's by Gabor Mate. I don't know whether it is actually as reversed as it looks like to me, but anyway, it's called The Myth of Normal, and the subtitle is Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And that pretty much covers the things that I like to talk about and write about. So Gabor Mate is a Canadian physician. He was born in Hungary during the Second World War. He's Jewish. His grandparents were murdered by the Nazis. His mother, as you can imagine, had some pretty traumatic experiences, and he had a rough start in life. And came to Canada, became a physician, has a family, and he lived in BC. He was a leader of a palliative care unit in BC. He spent many years working with drug addicts in Vancouver's downtown east side. So somebody who has a lot of expertise in dealing with people who are suffering. And so he started writing books at some point, I think partly as to heal himself. And so he's written books on addiction. He's written books on ADHD. He's written, which I haven't read that one yet, but I really should because did I mention that I squirrel? And my kids also sometimes have some issues with this sort of thing. So that could be helpful. I haven't read it yet, though I will completely admit this is this first book that I've really spent time with. And but this book is in some ways it's his crowning achievement. Oh, and he's got one called Where the Body Says No, which for me is really important because it's about chronic illness. And I have lived for many years with an autoimmune disease and started when I was in graduate school. If you've done graduate school, then you have some idea that is extremely stressful time of life. Hi, Paula. Nice to see you. And it is, by the way, if you're coming on live, drop me a comment, say hello, tell me where you're coming from. Um, so if you're somebody that I know, that's great. But if I don't know you yet, then I would love to know who you are and what you think about healing. Because I'm going to get to that. I'm just still talking about Dr. Mate and his the things that he's done. So so I said he's written books about addiction, about ADHD, about chronic illness. It's really important. And I was just talking about my own chronic illness that I was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease when I was 25 years old. I was in graduate school. I was under a huge amount of stress, not just the usual graduate school stress, but also I knew that I was in the wrong field. I was with the wrong person. I was not going in a direction that was authentic to me, and it was very painful and difficult. And so obviously I dealt with it by getting sick, because, when you're sick, then it's much easier to attribute all the things that you're not doing that you should be doing to your illness. And eventually I did make some changes in my life, change my field, change my partner, and change my country, and ended up here in Canada, where I've been living since 1994. I had 3 children and so on, but I was always fighting with this illness. And about 5 years ago, I started working with a holistic nutritionist, and also doing all sorts of work with myself, if you will, and brought myself into remission, and it was great. And lasted pretty much until this past summer, when I was lucky enough to be gifted a certain virus that we're all familiar with. And thankfully, I didn't have it too badly, but it did sort of put all sorts of things in motion that now I'm dealing with it again. So it's really been timely for me that this book has come out, because he basically pulls all of these things together. And it's fascinating, actually, because this is a really thick book, if you look at it. And it's, here you can see from this, you can see how thick it is. And he covers from the cellular level, talking about, hormones and so on, all the way up to societal level, like stage capitalism and the kind of stress and toxic society that we live in now, like the requirement to go, the requirement to always be productive. And it's so toxic. And consumerism, and the idea that, the only way to find happiness is by buying new things. And we've all been there. Some of us have been able to pull ourselves back a little bit. Some of us have had no choice but to pull ourselves back. But whether it's from, a necessity from maybe social circumstances or financial circumstances. I mean, we're all dealing with inflation. But also, people get sick, when people are disabled, when we all had a couple of years of a little more time to think about our lives and what we want and what's really good for us. And there's somebody on TikTok said, "Are you Muslim?" No, I am not Muslim. Sorry. But told you I would scroll. Okay, so he talks. I have been talking in previous weeks, previous talks. I'm talking about things like intersectionality and things like that, stress, all the different. Intersectionality is really interesting because it's a way of looking at the different axes, if you will, of stress and oppression that people can deal with. Like, just as an example, if you so as female, you're likely to be under certain sort of stresses in our society. For example, if it's dark outside, you might be very stressed to walk down the street by yourself, which sucks, but it's the way it is. And but if you are also a person of color and you present as a woman, then you've got 2 axes of oppression, that people might treat you badly because you have dark skin, and they also might treat you badly because you present as a woman. So that's two axes of oppression. And maybe, people, maybe you're disabled, maybe you're LGBTQ. There's various things that kind of pile on top of each other. And the thing is what people don't understand is that you can't separate these things. You can't say, well, I've discussions with Marxists who are like, well, it's all class. Class is very important. There's no question about it. And socioeconomic situation, and people in poverty just have a much harder life than people who are not. That's just a no-brainer. in a society that's predicated on money, if you don't have any, you're going to have a hard time. So, but the thing is that you can't separate these things. And like I see these discussions in social media that people are like, you know what, let's not worry about, transphobia right now because we've got to fight fascism. It's all one thing. That famous first they came for the da-da-da. It's all one thing. And if we're all going to be okay, or none of us are going to be okay. And that's what people don't always understand. But I was going to talk about healing. And so Dr. Mate spends a good chunk of his book talking, analyzing all the things that are problematic, whether it's stress, whether it's, poverty, whether it's, just toxic expectations. He spends a lot of time on childhood trauma. And all of us have some sort of trauma. Some people have, big T trauma, like, God forbid, child abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, abandonment. Like, for example, Dr. Mate himself, so when he was an infant, like basically about a year old, his mother had to leave him with relatives for his own safety. And then she got him back about 6 weeks later, but the damage was done. He felt very abandoned. And of course, all the stress and fear and terror that she was living under, hiding from the Nazis, had its effect on him, of course. So he talks about that. So that you might, or people who have been abused in childhood, that's capital T trauma. But we all have, even if it's, lowercase t trauma, maybe it's just, children have needs, and if for whatever reason they are not fulfilled, and like I said, it doesn't have to be capital T trauma. It can be parents who are preoccupied, parents who are stressed, parents who are having their own issues. Parents are humans too. I'm not here to blame anybody, but the point is that the fact remains is that all of us have some sort of childhood trauma. And then the question is, what do we do about it? And children are utterly dependent. Like, they cannot afford to not be taken care of. They'll die. So they develop coping mechanisms. And what happens is that they grow up with these coping mechanisms, and then those mechanisms might not be working so well for adults as they did for children. They maybe didn't work so great for the child either, but they were a way to survive. And then once people are adults and they continue with these childhood behaviors, it can be a real problem. And one of the things that he talks about, for example, people who have, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, people who have ALS, so amyotrophic, I forget, Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a progressive degeneration. It's a neurological disease that your muscles and like all your nerves kind of gradually degenerate until eventually you can't eat and you can't breathe and you die. It's not fun. And people basically progressively lose their abilities. And in North America, it's called Lou Gehrig disease because it was a famous baseball player named Lou Gehrig who had it. And what studies have found, I don't think it was his study, but he quotes it, is that people who have this tend to be extremely nice. Really, really nice. And everybody loves them, which is great. But the point is that they completely suppress or repress, and he talks about the difference between those two things, and their own feelings. and they take care of everybody else. And it's known that, people who, you'll see obituaries, people who died, and it'll be like, oh, they were so selfless, they took care of everybody else. And you're like, yeah. Like he talks about this woman who is diagnosed with like stage 4 cancer, and the first thing she says to her doctor is, I'm so worried about my husband. How's he going to, I won't be able to take care of him if I'm sick. And so he talks about, things like that, character traits that were developed as childhood protection mechanisms. Because, of course, if you are the good girl who always takes care of everybody, then, everybody's going to take care of you, or at least they won't beat you up. And so he talks about that, and how the fact that people aren't able to be their authentic selves as children, and then later how that causes diseases in adults. And I want to talk just a little bit about his chapter about healing, because I'm kind of coming to the end of, I prefer not to go too long with these calls, but just looking at his chapter 25 in this book. This is a really big book. It's called Mind in the Lead, the Possibility of Healing. And so he spent like a huge amount of this book, so all of this, exploring all the reasons that people get sick. And it goes like from the cellular to the societal. And he says, having traced the inextricable and reciprocal connections between them. And he starts talking about healing. And he says, how to move toward health in the context of a socioeconomic system staunchly uninterested in remedying any of its root maladies, and in the face of a pandemic that has both highlighted and deprived us of so much we take for granted. Now, this book came out in September of this year, which means it was written in 2021. And right now, right now we are seeing the effects of how people's immune systems have been destroyed by the pandemic, especially children. And, kids are dying of strep, which they did not do before, at least not since the advent of antibiotics. So, if you've ever read The Velveteen Rabbit, scarlet fever, which is strep, it used to be a leading cause of death in children, but it hasn't been for 100 years. And now it's really causing trouble, and its immune system has just been destroyed by COVID. So, I don't really want to talk about the politics of choosing to let her rip in so many Western countries. But he's talking about healing. And he defines healing as nothing more or less than a natural movement toward wholeness. Excuse me, just get some water. And he says, notice that I do not define it as the end state of being completely whole or enlightened or any similar psychospiritual ideal. It is a direction, not a destination, a line on a map, not a dot. And he says it's not synonymous with self-improvement. So many of us are, working on ourselves is a good thing. Self-improvement, I think, generally speaking, is a good thing. But very often people are focused on what's wrong. And that's not where healing comes from. Okay, I like that he calls it self-retrieval rather than self-improvement, because basically when you want to heal, what you want to do is to find yourself again. And that's, to heal your body, your mind, your spirit. All of these things have to heal. They have to come together. And so just very quickly, because of time, he talks about, hold on. He talks about he has some principles of healing, which I really like. He calls it 4 A's and 5 compassions. These are healing principles. And I just want to run them past you. And obviously I'm not going to be able to get into them in any detail, but I'd love it if you would drop me a message or a comment, depending on where you're seeing me, whether you're live or on the replay. and tell me what you think of these principles. So he says the 4 A's, and he says that they are not how-to steps or rigid injunctions. They're healing principles, which he says have proven useful guideposts for many people. And the first one is authenticity. And he says it's a quality more often marketed than manifested in our culture. And the thing about authenticity, it's really easy for people to mask and just be how they want people to see them. And it's very tempting, obviously. And it's so much easier to just go along with the flow. But if inside of you, you just know that the persona that you're presenting is not you, that is not a way for healing. So that is one of the first principle says the growing capacity to admit to oneself, ouch, that hurts. Or, I didn't really mean what I just said. Or I'm really scared to be myself in this situation is the impulse towards authenticity becoming stronger. So in the first instance, it's just about realizing when you're saying or doing things that are not actually authentic to you. Then the second A is agency, which he describes as the capacity to freely take responsibility for our existence, exercising responsibility in all essential decisions that affect our lives to every extent possible. So agency, this starts really, really young. And, children, toddlers are well known for fighting for agency. They want to make decisions over their own lives. And of course they can't because they're toddlers. But I remember with my own children doing my best to give them as much agency as possible within, the box that I had to keep them in for their own safety. I remember it would be like, do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt? You can choose which shirt you're going to wear. It'll be either the red one or the blue one. And most of the time that would work, thankfully. So people who feel that they don't have agency over their lives are definitely likely to get sick in one way or the other, because and he says, one thing that I love is that basically he says that patients, he's quoting someone who works as a counselor and in oncology departments. And she studied many cases of so-called spontaneous remission. And she says, of what had been diagnosed as a terminal malignancy. And she says, I know firsthand that the patients who listen and follow instructions are considered good patients, while the annoying patients are those who ask a lot of questions, bring in their own research, or worst of all, challenge their doctor's orders. I know my doctor was very exasperated with me all the time because I would listen to him and then I would do research and then I would do what I wanted. And he'd say, I'm going to write a letter to your GP. And he'd sit there with his thing and he'd basically say, I told Hadass to do this and this, and she's not doing it. So I just wanted to let you know that I did tell her to do this. Anyway, but then he says, these latter ones she found, those who challenge their doctor's orders, the latter ones she found, those who find ways to take control of their own healing are the ones likely to do better in the long term. So basically, I am not suggesting to go against medical advice as a matter of principle. Don't do that. If you really have a doctor that you don't trust, then don't go to them. That wasn't the issue with my doctor. We just had different ideas about how to handle things. But I do think he's very good at what he does, and I still go and see him. So, but the thing is that it's important for you to understand yourself. You are the expert on what's going on inside your body. And that's really, really important to remember that, because nobody knows yourself and your body and how you feel and how you react to things like you do. Doctors are there to give you advice. They don't actually know. They don't. They might some of them, the good ones will admit that, and they'll work with you to try and find the best solutions for you. But it's really important to keep your own agency and not feel that you're just a cork bobbing along with the tide, completely at the mercy of things that you don't can't control. And of course, there's a lot of things in life that we can't control. And we all found that out with the pandemic for sure. But I mean, people who live in war zones, people who have dealt, I mean, famous Viktor Frankl, who was in a concentration camp and wrote books, wrote this book, God's, Man's Search for Meaning. And basically what he says is that, he had agency over his own mind while he was in a situation where he basically had no agency. He was in a concentration camp, but he did have agency in his own mind, and that's what helped him survive. So number one was authenticity. Pay attention to yourself. And agency. See how much you can actually control. I find number three absolutely fascinating. His third principle of healing is anger. And I know that for a lot of women, especially, people have been socialized as a women, good girls don't get angry. And then for a lot of people who have been socialized as men, the only permissible emotion for them is anger. So anger is a very complex thing. But the thing is that whether it's suppressed, unexpressed, or amplified, he says both anger suppressed and anger amplified out of proportion are toxic. So feeling anger is natural and healthy. If something happens and you feel angry, it's important, like, you don't have to act on it. You don't have to be mean to people. You don't have to hit anybody. You don't have to yell at anybody. But the point is that to allow yourself to feel anger. There are people who think they never get angry just because they don't allow themselves to feel anger. It doesn't fit with who they think they are. Talking about authenticity, they have built this persona of themselves, which doesn't get angry. And you know what? It's okay to feel anger. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to act on it, but it's really important to feel it. And then the fourth one, and I'm going to round things off, is I think going to have to do another video about the 5 compassions that he talks about. But the fourth principle of healing that he talks about, the fourth A, is acceptance. And that is, it begins with allowing things to be as they are, however they are. It has nothing to do with complacency or resignation, though sometimes these can pose as acceptance. Think of the shrugging expression, "It is what it is." Just as stubborn egotism can moonlight as authenticity. Acceptance is the recognition, ever accurate, that in this moment, things cannot be other than how they are. And that, I think, is really, really deep because, if you think of somebody like Eckhart Tolle, who talks about the power of now, in this moment, the way things are, in this moment, where I am here talking to you, where you are listening to me, in this moment, the way things are is how they are. And, as time moves on, people say that, people waste a lot of energy trying to edit their past, Who was it that, trying to pretend, giving up hope on ever having a better past. I know it sounds weird like that, but that is what a lot of us do, is we keep trying to make our past better. We keep trying to edit our past. You can't. It has passed. And it's interesting, he says, acceptance also means accepting how downright difficult it can be to accept. It may seem paradoxical, but true acceptance denies or excludes no aspect of how it is, not even our impulse to reject how it is. You don't have to like it. Reality is reality, and reality can really suck. And it's okay to be angry and to say, I don't like this. But it still is what it is. And that part of healing is to understand what actually is, not what we want it to be, and not how somebody else promised us, promised us a rose garden or whatever. Accepting how things are, especially when you're dealing with illness. denial ain't just a river in Egypt. And on the one hand, it's really important to, to stay with your mindset that you are going to heal. But on the other hand, you also have to understand what is actually going on. So anyway, I've been talking for over 30 minutes. And I've barely scratched the surface of this topic. So I think I'm going to have to do more about it. So anyway, thank you for watching, whether you're on live or whether you're on the replay. I very much appreciate you being here. And again, this book by Gabor Mate, The Myth of Normal, I highly recommend it. And I would love to see your thoughts, your comments, whatever you would like to say about this. Just drop it wherever you happen to see this. So you have a great evening, and I'll talk to you again next week when it will be almost Hanukkah, and that'll be fun. No, actually, it will be Hanukkah when I talk to you because it gets dark early around here this time of year. So remember, I love you. Talk to you again soon. Bye. And now, and broadcast. Bye.